Right, now this will tell us. And that's pretty conclusive. Still going. Close. I think he's got it down.
How strong is he?
Welcome back to the Pick and Go podcast. It's your one-stop shop for all things Super Rugby. Well, it was. The season's over, so we're going to have to look for something else to talk about, and I think we will find something else to talk about as well. But before we get there, obviously, no Pretty Weepu again this week. He's tied up on our Wednesday as we record, and that was the only day that we could get into the studio. So we've brought in the recruits again, and I know I didn't think we'd have him back this quickly, but the reconditioning has worked a wonder, and we've got Jeff Goldie Wilson back. Jeff, welcome aboard once again.
Oh, I was waiting with bated breath. I couldn't wait to get the call up again. It's a privilege to be back on. I'm imagining I'll be here next Wednesday and the Wednesday after that. So let's carry on. Let's go for it.
And as always, we're joined from up north, the Big Smoke, with Ben Searle of Surly Talk Sports. Surly, welcome aboard once again.
Yeah, great to be here, mate. New studio, same old problems, Paulie, but hopefully that the content's as of high quality as it always is, mate.
Right, well, let's get stuck right into it then. And the question this week, well, it follows on from last week where we gave marks out of 10 for the 3 New Zealand teams that were out of Super Rugby. Now the final is all done and dusted. I'm going to get your marks out of 10 for both the Chiefs and the Blues. Jeff, why don't we start with the Chiefs first of all?
Look, for the Chiefs, they'll look at the season and they'll look at it probably as a missed opportunity. But in saying that, they weren't as consistent in 2024 as they were in 23. They were, 10 minutes away from winning a Super Rugby title last season. This year, it's almost like they played their final a week early in terms of their performance on the road against the Hurricanes. They went to Auckland, and the moment it started to rain, fancy that it raining in Auckland, then all of a sudden the favoritism went well and truly in the Blues, and everything the Blues did on a really challenging night was really good. So this season is pretty much based on the fact they got to where they were last year, but they weren't closer to winning a Super Rugby title. But to me, it's still probably an 8 out of 10, and that's because they probably weren't as good as they were last year. They were better last year, but this year, when push come to shove, they put themselves in a position that 10 other teams didn't have, which was to win the competition. They just weren't good enough on the night, weren't adaptable enough up against a Blues team. A couple of areas they did step up, which was at scrum time, which I expected them to struggle. So they'll look at this season bitterly disappointed that in the key 80 minutes when you're playing for the title, they pretty much got completely dominated. But I still think in terms, if you're a franchise and you're in a final, that's still a really successful season.
Surly, as Jeff correctly states, last year's final, they lost in the last 10 minutes. This year's final, they probably lost in the first 10 minutes. The game was almost done and dusted, especially as that rain started to come down. Your thoughts on how the Chiefs went this season?
Well, this could be boring, much like last week, because we're all agreeing again, aren't we? I actually had an 8 out of 10 written down. 9 wins, 5 losses in the regular season, but I feel like their last month of footy really saved them, and that was the way we expected them to start the season. On paper, I thought they had the best squad in the competition before we got things underway, because while they'd lost a few key players, they also had a fairly settled squad with the guys stepping into starting roles, having been in the team for a couple years. So I thought they were going to finish in that 1-2 mark. They didn't do that, but they still played their way through to the final off the back of a great last month of footy. So yeah, I have them as an 8 out of 10, but like Jeff said, great to get to the final. Then it was just, that was over early. And in the end, it was almost a spectacle where it won't be a memorable final purely just because of how dominant the Blues were, which is a credit to them. But it was also a bit disappointing as a fan to watch because yeah, the game was over early doors. The Blues were just way too good. That forward pack was phenomenal.
Right, Jeff, let's get to the champions. And it's been a while since they have been the champions. And they certainly did relish that, I guess, the final whistle and getting back to the top of the pile again. Your mark on the Blues for the season?
I actually think I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. Now, not in terms of a result, but in regards to them having a game plan right from week one, which they executed to the final week of the competition. It became very evident how they were going to play, and their new coach, his personality, his expectation, Stern Vern Cotter, was very, very upfront about how they were going to play, and basically everyone was put on notice early. Look, they scored a lot of tries through just pure physical domination, and that was carried on in the final. So, look, they lost a couple of games during the season. One was to a Hurricanes outfit away from home in Wellington, which was tough for everybody. And the other one was to the Crusaders away when the Crusaders were fighting for their lives in Super Rugby. Look, when it came down to it, they missed out on the top spot due to I suppose, lack of concentration in the last 15 minutes of the game against the Chiefs in regards to a bonus point. But if you looked at the result, ultimately for me, I think they were the team that were the hardest for anyone to beat, and their defensive record showed that through the course of the season. So it's a 10 out of 10 from me, because it doesn't have to be perfect in regards to results in terms of winning every game, but in terms of executing a plan that was going to suit them, which was necessary to win Super Rugby. And this is the challenge you have, right? If you're other sides that play a certain style for the first couple of months of the season, you get to June, you're going to face the challenges like you faced at Eden Park. And that is, and I agree with you, Surly, and I don't think last week was boring, because it just means we were all on the same page and understanding the game. I think I think ultimately, when I look at this, is the season itself played out where you come to the business end, you need to rely on your defense, and you'll be able to adapt to the conditions. And that's what the Crusaders have done for years. When the Hurricanes won their title in 2016, it was the three of the worst, windiest and coldest days in Wellington that they had to play through, and it didn't suit them. But what they did was they adapted and got the job done. You need to, when you get to the business end, when it comes down to winning finals, you need to be able to front up front, and it becomes a war of attrition. And the score might not have reflected that on the weekend, but the nature of the game certainly was.
But Surly, Vern Cotter has to be given a huge pat on the back for getting this Blues team all on the same page and working towards the same goal with the same game plan. The only real hiccup, I know he had a couple of losses. The one against the Crusaders was a desperation loss it was the Crusaders having to do everything they could to keep their season alive. And the only real sort of hiccup he had, I guess, was against the Hurricanes in Wellington, when I think he only had two backs on the bench. And unfortunately for him, he had two backs go down fairly early on in that match. Outside of that, everything that Vern Cotter touched pretty much turned to gold.
Yeah, that's typical from you as a Hurricane supporter, just to get a parting jab in there to the Super Rugby champions, Paulie. I really appreciate that. But yeah, Vern's done incredibly well. Like, as a first-year head coach, to come in, get that much buy-in from an established leadership group, almost fully changed the way that we're used to seeing the Blues play. When I think of Blues rugby, I think of razzle-dazzle backlines, highlight tries, teams chancing their arm, not so predictable as you would like them to be week in and week out. But this week, you knew what you were getting from the Blues this year. And he also put guys in positions to play above what we're used to seeing them play. Guys like Harry Plummer, he got the best out of all of these players through that environment that he created. So I think they outscored teams 110-35 in the finals. Their defense was outstanding all year round, but they could still score points. So yeah, I was blown away by this Blues season, and I think that final performance really just summed it up amazingly. That they've had a massive turnaround, and they look like a team that could be hard to beat over the next couple of years too, because while you're losing the likes of Akira, there's still a well-established core there of young players that are going to be around in New Zealand rugby, hopefully for many years to come.
Yep, I think we're very, very much thinking along the same lines here. I had the Chiefs with an 8.5 point mark for the season. I think Tokiaho missing out on the final was a huge loss for them. Certainly the way that the game turned out. And you'd have to give the Blues a 10 out of 10. I'll go with the result. I know Jeff's going with I guess, the way that they played and the way that they were all sort of tuned in to the same frequency. If you win the title, I'm going to give you a 10 out of 10. So, what else have we got? Right. I guess let's just have a brief look at the final, Jeff. I guess that the Blues were dominant from the outset and got conditions to suit. I guess in racing parlance, it would be the Blues were, I don't want to say that they're mudders, but they got the conditions to suit. They got the track that they wanted, and they exploited the fact that they had the advantage over the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think that the one thing you have to give them immense credit for, though, is the fact that in those conditions, often you see mistakes and errors. They didn't make those mistakes and errors. And in fact, neither team made those mistakes or errors. If you look at when the turnovers actually happened, the majority of those turnovers were about a legitimate steal and a breakdown, not necessarily a knock on or a set piece or ill discipline. And so, I mean, that was one thing that was always going to be under pressure for the Chiefs, is that they were going to get, in those conditions, limited opportunity to play in the right part of the field. I think the kicking strategy from the Blues was really good. They didn't actually kick long. They kicked high and meant there was a lot of contestable possession, but also they got into the middle part of the field. Even when the Chiefs got the ball, the Blues then said, well, are you prepared to kick it away, or do you want to continue to play? And we'll back our defence against anybody in those types of conditions. So that when the Chiefs tried to play, they ended up conceding either a turnover or conceding a penalty because they got isolated or a guy on the ground didn't release. And once you do that, you give away territory. What the Blues did incredibly well when they got territory is they were actually really accurate, in regards to their skill set under pressure, where there's a lot of collisions. Because when you just do one pass carry, you've got to be really secure in holding onto a ball that was reasonably slippery. And I give credit to both teams, given the conditions and not necessarily underfoot, but in terms of the ball, I thought the handling was really good. So the Blues just then took away, anything the Chiefs could do in regards to counter-attack by kicking the ball high. And then when they went to work in the tight, they just didn't make errors. They didn't make mistakes. And they forced the Chiefs, once the Chiefs got behind, to gamble. And they gambled on trying to make decisions around the breakdown. They got penalised, put themselves under more and more hurt. And then this was just about accumulating points. So I couldn't be, like I say, it's one of those things where you know how you want to play, whether you can do it or not in those conditions. The forward pack for the Blues were outstanding. Actually, the whole back line, basically, because everyone played like a forward. If you watch them, I just tried. I can't remember how many passes actually Harry Plummer made in the game. I can't off the top of my head remember him passing the ball. Like, it was basically everyone just carried. We carry. And when AJ Lamb carries and Rico Ioane carries, and how many times did Caleb Clark and Mark Talia pick and go? It just tells you exactly, what the game plan was, and they were good enough to execute it.
Certainly, the game did have a rugby league look to it in terms of the Blue, just taking that one up hit, and then defensively they were superb, really not giving the Chiefs much of a chance at all, or giving those playmakers in the Chiefs team the opportunity to show their skills, and that partly was due to the conditions that the teams had to play under. But give credit where it's due. The Blues defensively were very, very good for the whole 80 minutes on Saturday night.
Yeah, they strangled them, and they did what the Hurricanes failed to do, and that was just take them to that style of play that the Chiefs don't want to play. They want to play broken, expensive football with Damian McKenzie, Anton Leonard-Brown, that back three that they have with so much strike and lots of space, but the Blues didn't allow them to do that. And I think for the Chiefs, come 80 minutes, they would have been so frustrated because it felt like they fired 0 shots, and it was probably a game where they put so much prep work into how they want to play then all of a sudden you're back in the sheds, you've just lost and you've done none of what you spoke about. But that was more credit to the Blues and just them implementing and forcing the Chiefs to play a completely different style of rugby. So yeah, full credit to the Blues that those conditions really did suit them. But at the same time, they just looked like a team that wasn't going to be stopped. They were so dialed in. They were up for this in a major way. Obviously, they had guys moving on that it was really important to get them a championship too. And it just felt like while you were watching it, it was their time to win.
Righty-ho, Super Rugby season 2024 all done and dusted. Now we move on to the international, well, the start of the international season down this part of the world. And we had Razor Robertson's first ever All Black squad named earlier this week. First of all, Goldie, what are your overall thoughts on the All Black squad?
I've never seen on paper a poor All Black squad. I mean, it's just that's not how it happens. Like you look at the talent, you look at the names, you look at experience. You know, that's probably only the one area where you would start to go, we're a little bit light on guys who have played huge number of test matches. Like we've just had a huge number when you start going Retallick, you start saying Coles, you start saying Whitelock clearly, you start talking about even Mwanga, you talk about those guys, you start going, well, there's a huge number of test matches now that's not there. When you start looking at the numbers, pure by the numbers, the brackets for those guys. But ultimately, you look at it on paper and you go, look, this is a really talented, plenty of ability. This has got majority of the squad who've, been to a Rugby World Cup final, a lot of these guys, or been to a Rugby World Cup now, or have been in the environment. There's enough there, been there for 2 or 3 seasons. So on paper, it looks fantastic. I mean, I think it said 32, but, there's another 5 guys who are in camp. Like, that's the interesting part about this for me. Sam Dowry's gone. They only named 3 locks, but there's a 4th one at training. George Bauer's there. So essentially they've got 7 props at training. Ruben Love is there. So they've got another guy on call ready to go. So, I look at those sort of combinations of players and the depth. Peter Larkey's there as a development player training partner, So let's be honest, it wasn't really 32, that they named 37 in and around the group. To get a really good look at, they're obviously told you can only pick 32. And then they go, but we want to see him, we want to see him, we want to see him. And they're going to do that, right? So ultimately, there's probably only a couple of guys who would say, one in particular, we're going to talk about probably, who feels a little bit aggrieved and disappointed. But that's a decision that those selectors have made.
Shirley, your thoughts on the All Black squad? Scotty's first ever?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty standard, really, and a lot of it was expected. I think David Havili was the only one available from the World Cup for selection that didn't get selected, and he's a part of that wider group. So,
right.
So it really is pretty stock standard stuff. I didn't expect to see Tossi there, but through the Xavier Numia injury, he probably gets an opportunity. And then I was also surprised to see Wallace there, just because I thought maybe at 32 he doesn't make it, and at 36 he gets brought in. But I think it's a really exciting selection. So it's kind of your stock standard with a couple exciting calls there. But yeah, like Jeff said, when you cast your eye over that team sheet on paper, some really quality footballers there. And even I saw online people making teams of players that missed out. Other countries would go crazy to get their hands on that team, because I think that is a World Cup quarterfinal at least side from the players that were unlucky to miss out. So we're just so fortunate here, aren't we?
I think you could probably do that every time an All Black team is named, is make another team out of those who have missed out. And as you say, it would probably get to the World Cup quarterfinals. There'd be a number of international teams around the world who would love to have 1 or 2 players who haven't made the All Black squad. I guess if we dig in a wee bit deeper, there are 5 debutants: George Bell, Basilio Tossi, Wallace Satiti, Cortez Ratima, Billy Proctor. I think those are the all of the debutants there, and there are 4 players who weren't considered because of injury. Out of those debutants, Goldie, who's the biggest, I guess, bolter, or is there another bolter?
I think it's interesting. I've seen some rhetoric around the so-called revolution everyone was expecting. Like Razor himself admitted at the start of the season that he could pick 80% of the squad before Super Rugby started. And then he would have probably halfway through the season, well, I've got 90% of the squad written down. And then with a week to go, he said he probably had all but one, right? They were maybe looking at going, what's the balance going to fit right? And so, look, I think if you're talking about the real bolters, Pacific Tossi, for me. I mean, look, no one even, I didn't even know he was on the radar, you know. Obviously, Xavier Numia was a player who was on the radar before he got his calf injury. You know, I think when they look at Tossi and they look at their stocks at tight head, they've got actually a lot of versatility. Tamati Williams being able to play both sides. I was surprised they took 6 props, to be honest. But I think if you watched Ofatuanga Fasi come off in the final, he looked pretty banged up. I'm hearing it's a rib cartilage injury, which for a prop is not ideal. The fact he was out there in the Super Rugby final, I've had a rib cartilage injury before, and I took 3 weeks off, but I'm not a prop. You know, I think they just jabbed him up and away he went. But finally, I think the jab wore off, and then all of a sudden that first scrum after half time. So I think that was a surprise, and that's why I think Tossi is that. But you look at his story and you look at where he's got to, and they clearly are recognizing size, and he's a big man. And the point of difference about a lot of the great sides around the world right now are what their numbers 1 and 3 can do. You know, if you look at Ireland and South Africa, let's not rule out their props are outstanding. Vincent Koch, their ability to use the ball, they're a bit more than, you know, the traditional just scrum and line out. They can do that really well as well. France are the same. So they're looking for a little bit of, I think, growth in that area. So that's probably the one for me. He's the real, I didn't see that coming. No one mentioned him in our discussions. But I don't think a lot of us were thinking past 5. We got the 5 pretty easy and then went, okay, that'll be the 5 props. Taken 6, which is, I think, is a surprise.
Surly, Pacific Tossi, he probably, as Jeff says, probably wasn't on too many pundits' team lists. One other, possibly Wallace Satiti, although his form in the last fortnight of the competition probably put him more in the spotlight, I guess, than the likes of Pacific Tossi. But George Bell, he gets his first go as well. Of course, he's been a star for the under-21s and now gets a step up. Anyone else there that you look at and think, wow,
No, I was a little surprised with the George Bell one, but then you factor in that I think he was involved in camps last year, right? Pre-World Cup. So obviously that identified him pretty early. I thought Ricky Riccatelli had an outstanding year, particularly in the back end. So I thought he might have played his way in just through his finals form. Obviously, Wallace and Hoskins is the debate that everyone's having at the moment, but they're both 2 amazing footballers. So I think it's just whatever suits your game plan. And I also think Wallace's versatility might have helped him a little more. When you look across that loose forward that he selected, everyone can play dual positions. I think Wallace has played 6 at Super Rugby, he's played 8 at Super Rugby. So that and his work rate, which Razor mentioned, probably got him across the line. But for me, there's no wrong selection between those 2. So I'm really excited to see what he can become in amongst this All Black camp as well. So yeah, 5 newbies, but I think 3 or 4 of them were pretty expected. And then for me, I agree with Jeff. Tossi was the one that just came from out of nowhere. But I think Razor said, Jason Ryan said it was like being on Married at First Sight. As soon as he locked eyes with him, he was in love. So that was a great indication that they clearly see a lot of potential in the way he plays.
I'll tell you what, if you watch a wee bit of maths, you'll know that a lot of those relationships don't end.
There we go.
So we'll get away from that comparison. Goldie, look at Craig. He's gone.
What sort of podcast is this? You start if I know that was on the agenda, I would never have done any research in anyway. I mean, seriously.
Have you not been watching?
I change the channel when the ads come up. I just can't even. What is anyway? Carry on.
Right. I guess. Well, let's look at those who missed out. And Goldie, for yours, who's the most unluckiest player?
Well, people would say it's unlucky, and this is when you start talking about Hoskins Tutu. because there's clearly something that we don't know about that they don't like. And it's obviously a hard conversation for them to have. And they're looking, and I'll come back to this 5 debutants thing, is the fact that you're not an All Black until you've played. I'm not sure when these guys are going to get their first opportunity. Let's be really clear on that as well. Against England, am I going to see Wallace Satiti and George Bell and Pasiti Otosi? I'd be very surprised. I'd be really surprised. I think the thing that's really important to me here is around, we've got to remember that Jason Ryan has been in and around a lot of these players, virtually all of these players, for a long period of time. He knows them intimately and is close. Plus, I know Razor has, through under-20 programs and through, Barbarians and New Zealand 15s and all those sorts of things. So you start marrying all of those things up, is that, this squad, I think, in terms of the playing squad, is quite predictable. And that's why I come to the Hoskins versus Satiti. If you're a Hoskins and not going to play, and you're a Satiti and you're not going to play, who's going to possibly handle that better? Who's going to handle not getting opportunity? Who's going to be sitting there going, I want to learn everything I possibly can. And Hoskins has been in unfortunate situations where he's just been on the fringe because Adi Savia is the starting number 8 for the All Blacks. I don't see that changing for me. And so it's whether or not do you see Hoskins Satutu as a bench player compared to a Luke Jacobson who can cover multiple positions. Then we've got to look at the locking stocks around. We only picked 3 locks. So Finau gives you that versatility. It looks as though he's capable of playing lock, and possibly being able to shift in there if they got desperate, if they lost a couple in a test match, for example. So I think there's a lot around that versatility, hybrid players. And, I think Satiti and Bell, and to me, if things are going really well, we might put you out against Fiji in San Diego. Proctor's the same. If things, we're still trying to find ourselves, and, if we lose a test to England, all of a sudden we're going, oh, hold on, where are we at right now? So I don't think, when I look at that group, I think Satutu's obviously unlucky. I think Ruben Love's unlucky. I'm really surprised. 4 out-and-out wingers, plus Rico Ioane. I don't understand that. And then if you look at fullbacks, we've named Bowden at first 5. Stephen Perifetta is the only player named, realistically. I wouldn't put a Moni Narawa in that conversation as a guy who you would want to play fullback at this stage in his career just yet. So that's the other one for me, is Ruben Love. Is the fact he's not part of that 32, and he's not going to be looked at as that next option as fullback. That to me, I find very interesting.
Surly, I guess it's fairly easy to look at someone like Satutu and go, he's probably the unluckiest player not to make it. But in your eyes, if you look around, Jeff's just throwing out a few other names there. Ruben Love, for you, the unluckiest?
Yeah, I think the 2 that have been thrown out there are probably the ones. And look, if you go to Stephen Perifetta, we don't have a specialist fullback. And if you, for me, when he plays in the 10 jersey, either for Taranaki or for the Blues, I think that's when he plays his best football. So basically, we've got 3 first 5s who can all play fullback. And one of them is going to become our All Black fullback until Will Jordan comes back. So what it's shown then is that Ruben Love's the next cab off the rank. And then guys like Shooter and that are really down the pecking order. They would basically rather go for versatility than give one of those specialist fullbacks an opportunity. So I was a little surprised at that. Jeff obviously had Perifetta in his squad last week. I didn't, just because I went for a specialist. But clearly, again, they've shown they need guys that can cover multiple positions. And that's what they're going with at the moment. So yeah, I was a little gutted for Ruben Love and for Sean Stevenson, who didn't have a good final, but it just shows their selection methods and what they're prioritizing for the future. And that Will Jordan is probably out and out your number 1 starting fullback. And then everyone else is going for that bench spot where you need to be able to cover a couple positions.
Jeff, finally, Scott Barrett captain. Was that one of the easier decisions for Scott Robertson?
I don't think any decision around your captain's easy, but it was in this case, because I think the relationship between the 2 of them, understanding what success looks like, having a captain who understands the way your coach operates is absolutely critical. Like if he was starting a brand new relationship going into this, having only 9-10 days to prepare for the first Test match against a World Cup semi-finalist in England, and they've brought their stronger squad, bar a couple of guys through injury. It's really hard to try and form a relationship in a short period of time. But also, when you've got something that's already established and you know well, why wouldn't you go there? You know, and to then go to two guys who in the All Blacks I think have been critical and an integral part of it, and Ardie Savea and Geordie Barrett. I think this is a really big step forward for Geordie Barrett. In the past, it's been his brother. You know, you sort of look to it saying it's been Beauden Barrett who would be that next voice. He'll always have a leadership role. But the other thing that it looks to me too is that with Beauden Barrett being named as a second first five and not as a vice captain per se, is that a hint maybe they're moving on a little bit from Beauden and going, okay, when we've got Damien McKenzie and Will Jordan and Stephen Pettifeta and those guys, you know, because he has been our safety blanket at 10. Beauden Barrett's played at fullback. If anything was to happen at 10, we saw Damien McKenzie had to bide his time for a long time and even didn't get bench spots because Beauden was that 10 cover. So I think there's some selection things that are going to be very interesting. But in regards to the leadership, I think it was easy. It was simple. The relationship was key.
Same with you, Surly, to use a term that you've already used today. Barrett Robertson, married at first sight, easy peasy.
Careful if you go one more time with that.
Yeah, well, hopefully, like you pointed out, Paulie, the success rate isn't great. I think we only have one New Zealand couple that's gone the distance, and Brett, and I forget her name as well. I'm sure Jeff is very familiar with the couple, and it's good to see them getting lucrative magazine deals years on from that happening. But yeah, personally, I am a massive believer in Ardie Savea being the actual captain within the camp. So he's the guy who leads people off the field, on the field. He's like the culture guy. I think he's probably the one that holds the most respect in amongst the playing group. So I would have loved to have seen Ardie be the captain, but at the same time, like Jeff said, there's previous relationships there. Scott Barrett's a heck of a player. He's one of the first people you chuck down on your team sheet week in and week out. He's already proven that he's a strong leader, and he's going to be around for longer than Ardie is at that international level now, just due to age as well. So yeah, I expected that decision. I don't have any problems with it, but I just love when Ardie's captain. I don't know why. I think he just has that aura about him, and I think he appeals to a wide majority of people who, when he speaks, you listen, and he's always entertaining, and he's charismatic, and he says what he thinks, and I really value that. But
would you have taken the 3 in the World Cup final instead of kicking for the corner? Because that's his decision.
Yeah. And
I'm sorry. I know Sam Whitelock would have taken the shot at goal, and I know Scott Barrett would have taken the shot at goal. You know, I just look at this and go, you know, I think, you know, understanding the relationship to me and understanding what Razor's going to try and achieve, I think it's one of those things where I think a lot of these players, it's going to be different, and they're going to have to get on board very, very quickly. And I think the best way to do that is with guys that he knows and he trusts, and you know, I think that's absolutely critical. You know, to me, I look at a Cody Taylor as that. To me, I look at the future, and I think when you start talking about an off-field leader, you know, I think for me, he's the guy I'd like to see take up that mantle. I really do. I think he's a guy who's been through some real challenges. The other thing about Ardie is that, you know, these guys that are coming off sabbaticals. And he's got another one in his contract, I understand, for another couple of years' time, a year out from Rugby World Cup. You know, I want people who are committed to playing here in New Zealand, that's their goal, and they front up every Super Rugby campaign and show, and that's what Scott Barrett's going to do, guarantee it.
It's interesting though, right? On that point, Geordie's off next year from Super Rugby as well. So there's a vice captain who's departing, but I do agree with the Geordie call as well, because obviously he's going to be the first 12 that you write down on the team sheet every week as well. So it's a massive step up for him. But yeah, I think sabbaticals are just going to become a part of things, especially for these guys, younger guys coming through. It's going to become pretty stock standard, unfortunately.
Righty-ho, I think we've dissected and we've helped Scott Robertson out once again. I know he's a big fan of the show. Let's get to the hunch part of the show. Do you guys have it? Oh, look, I've got a hunch. It's not a betting hunch. Jeff just mentioned earlier, you know, when are these guys going to get some of these debutants going to get some game time. Well, I was watching a movie the other night, and it was on an aircraft carrier, and they were ringing a bell or something, and I thought, oh, aircraft carrier bell. I think that signifies that George Bell will make his debut in San Diego, where I think a number of US ships are docked. So
that's nice.
Yeah, George Bell to make his debut in San Diego. Not sure if he'll be starting or whether he'll be coming off the bench, but I think we'll see George get his first cap on it's a third test of the year against Fiji.
Under Siege wasn't Under Siege 2 with Steven Seagal, was it? Come on. Hey, what a classic.
One of the great movies.
Oh, what a classic. He hasn't been hit in his face ever in his life, Steven Seagal.
No.
Hasn't caught one ever.
No, he's fantastic man. Anyone else got a hunch?
No, you're too creative for me, Paulie. I've got nothing for you, unfortunately.
I've got one. I mean, it's the Blues week. It'll be New South Wales week.
Hey,
the Blues.
Get up
New
the
South
Blues.
Wales are going to even it up in State of Origin, baby.
Love it.
State of Origin. There's my hunch. There it
Nice.
is. There
Wow,
it is.
I did not expect that from Goldie, but yeah.
Oh, well, the Queen. Look, hey, there's one team that tries to use the ball, and the other one's that tries to bludgeon it up. Which team do you think I'm going to support? You know, the one that played. Laurie Daly was a wonderful, wonderful player. Didn't win many State of Origin games, to be fair. But I tell you what, he was a beautiful man to watch play the game. So
Up the
I'm all
Blues.
over it.
Righty-ho. Well, look, the bookies have put out some markets for the All Blacks for the season, and I think we should have a little go at spending $100 each and putting some bets on. Seeing as Jeff lost all of his winnings last week.
Hold on, no, I didn't lose all of it. I lost 100 of it.
No, you said I'm going to reinvest everything I've got.
Well, you said I wasn't allowed to. Now hold on. You can't change the rules to make me sound like a real loser. Completely. I sent the invoice to the Chiefs.
Right. Anyway, the boys have got some markets out for the All Black season. And that's, first of all, the first team to defeat the All Blacks in 2024. They've got 14 tests this season. And so they've got exact amount of wins for the All Blacks in tests this season. Also, there's a band as well, and the top season try scorer for the All Blacks. Why don't we start with you, Surly? You've had a look at these markets. What sort of anything stick out for you, stand out?
I jumped to those winning numbers there, the bands, and then the exact numbers. So I like that 12 to 13 games band for me. That gives us the potential to lose 2 games. I think that back-to-back tests in South Africa over there is going to be really tough. And then I think when we head north, you got to be realistic in that we're probably potentially going to drop 1 there up against some quality sides. So I like that 12 to 13 win game band at $2.75. And then I went even more specific and I went the 12 wins on the nose, paying $5. I jumped on that too. Same logic there again, but yeah, those were the ones that stood out for me. I was going to have a little flutter around some try scorers and things like that, but it's so hard to know because you don't know what way Razor's going with selections at the moment. The hookers are always appealing, and you can assume that Cody Taylor will spend a fair bit of time there and he'd be a decent shout. But yeah, I went the win bands. I think we're going to get 12 wins this year.
Right, Jeff. You've had a look, so
he stole him a bet. He stole my bet again. And like you say, the logic's very, very similar. Interesting, the bands 0 to 5 wins, only playing $31. That's tight because I tell you what, that would be a catastrophe if we didn't win 5 games of rugby this year.
Yeah.
Absolute catastrophe, and that would be history would tell us that's never going to happen. Look, I'm very similar. I do like the 12, but also I wouldn't be adverse to putting just put $20 on 14 wins and undefeated season. Where if things get going well and other squads around the world, sometimes are transitioning. If we get on a roll and get things absolutely humming, you just never know, So just having a wee flutter there. But the try scoring one, I think is always an interesting one. how do I think the All Blacks are going to play? Who's going to play the most test matches, you know, in those try-scoring positions? Who's going to be a constant, you know? And when you've picked 4 wingers, that means I think you stay away from them because I think they're going to rotate some guys in and out, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be interesting in that regard. So I think you're crazy not to go with a Cody Taylor. Yes, he might not play 80 minutes, but what I think he'll do is he'll play some significant minutes, and I think they'll use our line out as a weapon. I think it can be a weapon for us. They'll use their size. I think particularly against the likes of Argentina and Australia, there are opportunities there. Obviously, when you go up against Fiji, you're trying to look at the set piece and you'll use it. So at $8, you know, as the leading try scorer, he's probably one for me. And then the other one, so I'm little nibbles here, because why would you go large? Nibble a bit here or there. I think Rieko Ioane, who couldn't score a try in Super Rugby, right? Couldn't score a try in Super Rugby. He could have a huge year, you know, for the All Blacks. And this is a guy that does know how to score tries.
Yeah.
You know, and I think there might be situations where they use his versatility and he might end up slipping out to the wing. So carry an Anton Lienert-Brown, maybe even explore the possibility of not having 3 backs on the bench. You know, just maybe carry a halfback against some of the bigger teams, just carry a halfback and Anton Lienert-Brown, for example. If you've got Bodie out there and you've got someone maybe who you think can cover fullback if there's an option. I don't know. I'm just sort of going a little bit sort of left field there as well. So that's me. I've got Rieko, little wee nibble there with. So let's just go 10 on that and 20 on Cody, 20 on the undefeated, and 50 on the 12 wins. Because I'm with you. I think maybe drop one to South Africa because they'll be tough, and then maybe drop one at the end of the year games. And if we get to the end of the year, you've got England, France, and Ireland. So that's somewhere, I think. And God, what about you guys? Would you think if it's a 12-win season, we'd be pretty happy?
Yeah, for sure.
Would that be what, an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10?
I think it'd be a pretty successful year, as you know, 14 test matches and you end up with 12 wins. It's, you know, pretty consistent with what you know, All Black Rugby's used to.
Yeah, as long as those scorelines are close, then you can excuse losses in South Africa and in the North to quality sides, as long as it doesn't blow out 30-plus point losses. But we could never really imagine that. Then 12 out of 14 would be a massive tick in a first-year coaching campaign.
Yeah.
Right. I can't believe this, but I am thinking very, very similar to Jeff here. I think Rieko Ioane is great value at $19 to be the top try scorer for the season for the All Black. And for the same reason, I think we will see him on the wing at some stage during this season as well. So because he's got that double threat in the midfield and then also out wide, I think he's going to get a number of opportunities, and I hope that we see him on the field in San Diego, because I think we'll see a few tries there. So it's certainly, you'll be going a long way towards being the top try scorer if you do get to start against the Fijians in San Diego. So I'm definitely going to have $20 on Rieko Ioane to be the top try scorer for the season. Outside of that, once again, I'm very, very similar to Jeff. I'm going to take New Zealand undefeated in 2024. That's paying $18. So that means that they could have a draw or two, and that would still pay.
Oh, so, loopholes. We didn't know the T's and C's there, mate. Chuck that in my bet then.
Yeah. So if they have 12 wins and a couple of draws, well, that's undefeated. So, yeah, I'm going to have 30. No, I have 20 on that as well at $18. And then in the wins section, I'm going to take the exact wins, and I'm going to take 13 and 14, 13 wins and 14 wins, 14 wins at $21, 20 on that. And then I've got 40 left on 13 wins at $6.50. So I think this is, I think All Black teams after a World Cup year, still, they seem to be able to just continue on, whereas other nations are sort of already starting to plan ahead and I guess not dropping matches, but willing to learn a few things as they get closer to another World Cup. So, yeah, that's where I'm going. So I'm fairly similar to Jeff there.
What for you guys would be a number that you go, oh dear? What's the number you go, oh, okay. or is the nature of the defeats? Is it the nature versus because the ordeal came the moment we lost to Argentina, probably in Christchurch, right? It was the ordeal.
Yes.
Hold on, we could accept you could live with losing to South Africa because that's hard, but then you come back and then Argentina beats you for the first time. Even Ireland, when we got beaten, all of a sudden we had to accept Ireland was a really, really good rugby team, right? And we weren't at our best for that series, didn't have a few guys available. But what's the number, lads, where you go, right, okay, we need a review. We got to review this situation because New Zealand rugby is the best in the world at doing reviews and not listening to them. So what would be the number?
Well, for me, I think it's anything under 9 wins because that means then that we've lost to Argentina, we've lost to Australia, or one of those two. We've probably dropped a test to England, and then we go over there and we drop one as well in the north, or a couple in the north. So out of the 14 games, as All Black fans, we're so used to winning now. I think anything under 9 wins would be seen as an interesting season, because if it was Ian Foster at the helm, then people would be calling for his head at 9 wins.
Yeah, I think Scott Robertson's going to get a wee bit of sort of. We're not going to be as harsh.
There's a honeymoon.
Yes, correct. It's not going to be a long honeymoon. Got to get that ship back on track again. But there'll be a wee bit of leeway for Scott Robertson in his first season at the helm of the All Blacks. So
I think there'll be a long honeymoon.
Oh,
if he wins, if he keeps winning, the honeymoon will continue. Like he'll only become under pressure the moment we get a defeat. Like that to me, the honeymoon will be actually as long as it is until we lose a game, and then okay, what's next? And then it'll be I think it will be long as we win some big test matches and the ones that are really critical. And that you know what I mean? Like I think he'll have the benefit as long as he keeps winning, the honeymoon will stay. We'll get more and more lenient the more success he has.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Let's hope that this honeymoon goes right through for 4 years and just doesn't stop. That'd be the ultimate. I guess we've sort of covered everything. Yeah.
The other big question, if he goes 14 from 14, do we see him breakdance in the final game?
Where's that game?
Italy.
No.
Nah, maybe if it was Twickenham or something a bit more dramatic, but yeah, no one's breakdancing in Italy.
I think maybe the breakdancing days are gone.
Not even a World Cup win?
Maybe that might be the exception to the rule, but I think that'll be, I think that would be the one time he may do it, but he'll be 4 years older by then.
The hips.
It's
Yeah,
it's tough. That hurts. That's and even this last time I saw it was a lack of his, flexibility. I think it was just, it's taking its toll.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't as happy with his performance. I thought it was more the players around him hyping it up, which gave that dramatic effect. I thought he was about a 6 out of 10 since we're doing our rankings.
Yeah, and Richie Mwanga himself, he came in that last one.
Yeah,
I think it was careful. You don't want to do that. You don't want to show the coach up.
No.
I know you guys are tight.
Also, that's why he's in Japan. Razor gave him the nod to depart out the back door. Gotcha.
We'll give you a couple of years to go away and think about it, son, and then we'll have another conversation about when you're coming back.
Makes more sense now. Got it.
Well, I think if Razor's going to take a step back in terms of the breakdancing, then someone in the leadership team has to step up and continue.
I'd love to see Jason Ryan give it a crack.
Oh.
Yeah, I ain't touching that. Anyway, the boys have got the odds out for the first test against England. All Blacks $1.12. England $5.50. All Blacks
absurd. That's all I'll say.
14.5-point favourites. The All Blacks.
That is crazy.
Okay. We'll probably talk about this next week in the lead up to that first test. Jeff, I'm guessing you've got the weekend off this weekend.
Mate, I've got what have I got? I've got second 15 and first 15 rugby with Westlake boys. That's one of my boys is out there, so I've still got rugby to go to. I had one weekend where I watched 5 games of rugby when the quarterfinals were on, 2 school games, and then the quarterfinals and the game I was working on. If that's not a code head, then But no. It's in saying that, Japan and the Māori All Blacks, and actually you talked about that second group, right? Well, the Māori All Blacks, you look at that team, that's got some talent. That is, I mean, if you look through the names that are in that squad, and then so pretty much the name in that squad, the 37 players that the All Blacks have got, you've got to say to yourself, everyone talks about our depth. I'm looking forward to seeing that game this weekend, the Japan 15 game. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Surly, you out in the footy field again this weekend?
Now we've got the bye this week, then we won last week, so we get 2 weeks off before the semi-final, but I will be heading along to Westlake to watch Westlake Rosmini. I think that's going to be a great game. And as a ex-Westlake boy, obviously you fire up for that one. A lot of my mates are Rosmini lads, and Westlake have just been dominating over the last few years, so looking forward to that. And then, of course, off to Mount Smart after that. So she's still a packed day of footy. That's just not your usual footy, let's say.
66.
Hey.
Every Warriors fan I've seen, I've just said 66.
No, well, the boys were more concerned about the All Blacks squad and how Razor was going to work it. But now that distraction's out of the way, they can get back to playing some football.
Okay. If that's the excuse you want to run with, you run with it.
I just made it up and it sounded good in my head.
Well done.
Cheers.
All right, let's move on before we have a big scrap between Westlake and Rosmini. Anyway, thanks again to good friend Jeff Wilson for joining us 2 weeks in a row. I'll tell you what, he's getting back into the scheme of things. He doesn't look jaded. I think we might be able to have him back another time. I'm not going to say when. I'm just going to say we'll have him back.
I'll block out next Wednesday, will I?
Well, I didn't want to say it, but I saw Pity's side lost 41-0 yesterday to Nelson College, I think it was. And then obviously the Canes season didn't quite pan out. So to me, he seems like a man that's running scared, but shout out to you, Pity.
Yeah, he's obviously not a happy man at the moment, but we'll get him back in here. Just give him a wee bit of time just to regather and get his thoughts. Surly, all the best this weekend as well.
Cheers,
even though you're not playing.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, okay then. And we'll be back next week with another episode of the Pick and Go. And I guess we'll be looking at the first test between the All Blacks and England.